The Greek text of the Iliad records a conflict that, by the time of our story, has already lasted 10 grueling years. It describes a stalemate, a cycle of violence that neither side has the power to resolve through conventional military means. In a final attempt to break the deadlock, the armies agree to a single duel between Menelaus and Paris. Menelaus dominates the fight. He shatters his sword on Paris's helmet, grabs him by the horsehair crest, and drags him toward the Greek lines. But just as the war is about to end, the goddess Aphrodite intervenes. She snaps Paris's chinstrap and whisks him away in a thick mist, depositing him safely back in his own perfumed bedroom. This divine interference overrides the mortal agreement. The oaths are left unfulfilled, and the war remains exactly where it started, unresolved and no longer governed by human rules. Hector, the primary champion of Troy, is left to face the Greek army, while his brother Paris hides behind palace walls. He watches the victory his army nearly secured vanish into a mist of familial shame. To reclaim his city standing, Hector chooses to ignore the failed truce and take the fate of the entire war into his own hands, pushing a fresh assault against the Greeks. By acting unilaterally to bury his brother's cowardice, Hector sets the first falling domino in motion. It is a decision that will eventually force every other hero into a trap of their own making. Hector's momentum pins the Greeks against their own ships. Their only protection is a defensive trench and a heavy stone wall, the final physical barrier between the Trojans and a total Greek massacre. As the Trojans prepare to storm the wall, an eagle flies across the front of the army. It carries a blood-red snake that is still alive and struggling, until the bird drops the serpent directly among the Trojan troops. The commander Polydamas interprets this as a definitive divine warning. He urges Hector to halt the assault immediately, fearing that a breach will lead to a disastrous retreat. Hector rejects the warning. He declares that he will follow the will of Zeus rather than the flight of birds, stating that fighting for his country is the only omen he needs to consider. Hector picks up a massive, pointed boulder and hurls it at the Greek gates. The impact shatters the heavy planks and hinges, allowing the Trojan army to pour through the breach. Hector achieves his tactical victory, but he has crossed a boundary that the gods themselves had signaled him to respect. He is now operating entirely on the momentum of his own will. Inside the camp, the Greeks are in a state of total panic. Patroclus, seeing the ships beginning to burn, begs the legendary warrior Achilles to set aside his own anger and join the defense. Achilles offers a compromise. Patroclus can wear Achilles' own famous armor into battle. The sight of the legendary gear is meant to trick the Trojans into thinking Achilles returned, forcing them to retreat. Achilles sets a non-negotiable limit. Patroclus is to drive the Trojans away from the ships, but once that line is held, he must return. He is expressly forbidden from advancing toward the walls of Troy. Patroclus is initially successful. He drives the Trojans across the ditch and even kills Sarpedon, a mortal son of Zeus, pushing the enemy forces all the way back to Achilles' boundary line. But the success of the slaughter intoxicates him. Patroclus breaks the one rule Achilles set, charging past the safety of the ships and toward the city of Troy itself. Patroclus pushes his assault to the very gates of the city, attempting to scale the high walls of Troy 4 separate times in pursuit of total victory. On his 4th attempt, the god Apollo intervenes. He strikes Patroclus from behind, knocking the helmet from his head, shattering his spear, and stripping the armor from his body, until Patroclus stands paralyzed and defenseless. While he is dazed and completely unarmed, a Trojan soldier named Euphorbus impales Patroclus through the back with a spear. Hector finishes the kill, stabbing Patroclus in the lower belly and boasting over the man who had dared to think he could sack the city. This wasn't a failure of Greek arms. Patroclus overstepped a clearly defined limit, and his death was the direct consequence of that choice. With his final breath, Patroclus delivers a prophecy to the man standing over him. He warns Hector that he was only the 3rd man to strike him, after a god and a soldier, and that Hector now stands in the shadow of his own death by the hands of Achilles. Hector dismisses the prophecy, convinced that his victory over Patroclus is proof of his own invincibility. That victory leads him directly to his end. Achilles eventually kills Hector and binds his body to the back of a chariot, dragging the corpse through the dust of his own homeland. But the triumph is hollow. Achilles is left unable to sleep, trapped in a cycle of grief and the repetitive desecration of a body that cannot answer his anger. The tragedy of the Iliad is not found in the scale of the war, but in the realization that these godlike heroes spent the entire conflict building the very traps that would eventually kill them.